I thought today that we could have a little chat about yarn shows. They are, of course, my favourite thing in the crochet calendar. So whether you're going to your very first yarn show or you've been to a few, they can be a little bit overwhelming. There are so many beautiful stands, different people all about the place, and of course, so many tempting things to buy. Having been both a visitor and a vendor at many yarn shows over the years, I thought I would share some of the things that can make the day so much more enjoyable. One thing to remember is that yarn shows are very different from one another. Some may feel more geared towards knitters, others to crocheters. You'll see lots of different spinning and fibres at another. And there are some that are really good mixture of all different crafts. So if you have been to a yarn show and it wasn't quite what you were expecting, don't let that stop you attending a different one. I've always thought of yarn shows of heading out on a little bit of an exploration. You may of course be attending with a particular yarn dyer in mind, or perhaps a certain craft that you're already passionate about. But yarn shows can really be an opportunity to see what else is out there in the fibre world. So I've made a list of some of the things you may see or might be on the lookout for when you are attending a yarn show, and I'm going to pop them on the screen. You may find indie dyers, hand-dyed yarn, crochet designers, knitting designers. Of course, you're going to see lots of different notions and stitch markers, beautiful project bags, buttons, books and patterns, kits, handmade hooks even, and locally made accessories. I know myself that when I attend different yarn shows and I get to explore, I've definitely ended up buying things that I hadn't intended to. You know, the type of thing, like you would have seen the yarn online and scrolled straight past, but in person it was exactly what you were looking for. I got the chance to pick it up and feel how soft it was, and could almost see a new design come to life. It was almost like a thought of, oh, this is so completely different to what I was expecting it to be. I think that is got to be one of the biggest advantages of attending a yarn show, is being able to touch and feel yarn in person. I know that a lot of us, especially us crocheters, are going to go to a yarn show and immediately think, I'm only here for the crochet. I appreciate it, but suddenly we're watching someone spin some yarn, perhaps, in my case, or maybe weaving something on a loom. You may see needle punching or needle felting, different types of embroidery, even macrame. I'm not saying you have to go there and pick up another hobby like I did, but it is quite fascinating to see people doing different crafts in person. And I'm always one of those people that stops and watches different demonstrations. When I was most recently at the Midlands Wool Show in Wolverhampton, I was chatting to someone who'd recently published a new book designed exclusively for left-handed knitters. Now, as someone who crochets right-handed but writes with my left hand, I found it really interesting that, much like crocheters, we might need to be taught slightly differently if we want to knit with our left hand. I'm going to pop the details of her brilliant book right here somewhere on the screen so that you can have a look and find out more about it. But I do love to stop and watch different demonstrations, because you get to see someone who's incredibly skilled at their craft, ask them questions of course, and if you want to, you can learn a little bit more about it without having to invest all the money into a new craft. It ends up being really quite inspiring, and you end up coming away with your questions answered about a skill you never knew even existed. One of the joys of the summer wool show for me is the Guild Room. It's near where the workshops are held, and because it's in Bedfordshire, there is a big kind of exhibition of different Bedfordshire laces on display. You might not know, but Bedfordshire is actually quite famous not only for hats, but also for its lace making. And I find it really interesting to kind of delve into some of the history around the local crafts around each of the yarn shows. So most yarn shows will have a representative of their local knitting and crochet guild or their spinning guild, and they are so knowledgeable. And if it's your local yarn show, you may find out that there is a guild there that you can join to find out more about your local crafts. I think my biggest advice for anyone attending any of the yarn shows or wool shows is go ahead and touch the yarn. And not only touching just the yarn, but touch the sample. I'm often quite encouraging to people to touch the bamboo cotton blends I have on my stand, or the silky soft that I have from Yarn Unique, because these are fibres that we wouldn't necessarily automatically think to use with crochet. It can really transform how the fibres feel when they're worked up and not just on the ball. So if there is a skein you think is pretty, you've had a feel and you like it, you're not sure how it might knit or crochet up, ask the vendor or the stall holder if they have a sample of that yarn worked up, so you can feel the difference when it's actually been stitched. One of my favourite moments as a designer is seeing someone feel one of my garments, much like my Bittersweet Margaret skirt. That's made in True and I love seeing people's reactions to how soft that bamboo, or that's 100% bamboo, feels in the hand and how it will feel on the skin for a garment. I think people will appreciate seeing how it drapes when it's stitched up, and that goes for the same for other cotton bamboo blends. And I think it is really worth asking a stall holder or a designer, even a yarn dyer, to actually, to see if they have a sample of what you're touching in the skein. Sometimes it feels so different when it's been stitched up. It might feel softer, the drape might be more unbelievable than you can even comprehend. And again, that's another huge benefit of yarn festivals and wool shows. We all love to shop online, but there is something quite special about touching something before you've bought it, or seeing that colour with your own eyes rather than guessing is it the same as on the screen. It also gives you a chance to see how the fabric you're going to make is going to move in real life. That's why I have so many garments on my stand, because the picture might look drapey but actually it's firmer in real life, or vice versa. So it is always nice to see lots of different samples and examples even of how these yarns are stitched up. One of the reasons I have so many samples is because I want to give people the opportunity to potentially try the sample on, maybe even to have a feel of how that fabric feels in their hands once it's worked, and to bring it to life in such a different way than a photo can. I think to that end, it's really worth mentioning not to be worried about asking questions, such as, for instance, if you're wondering what hook size is going to work with that yarn, or you've never heard of that fibre blend before, what's it made up from? There really are no silly questions at a yarn show, and I'd rather someone ask me a question than went away wondering and then had a missed opportunity to grab something special. You're never going to be interrupting the person on the stand. And a good example of that is where at the Midlands Wool Show again, I had those new, I've forgotten what they're called, lucette forks. And people kept asking me, what is this? If you're not sure what a lucette fork is going to make, the name of it is not going to help you. It is just a tool that makes an amazing square-shaped braid, but it's quite nice to be able to help people understand what that tool is used for, how they might apply it to their crochet or their knitting, and of course it gives me the opportunity to talk about the history behind lucette forks too. It really is one of the nicest parts of being on a stand, is that opportunity to discuss what things are and how they might be used and how they might enjoy them as well. In the same breath though, if you're not one of those talkative people, you don't have to talk, don't worry. Don't feel that you have to talk to a vendor just because they are hovering or they're tidying up or something like that. If you don't want to have a conversation, that's absolutely fine. I will certainly leave you be, and I'm sure that many other people will. For a lot of us vendors, we understand that some people just want to have a browse and do that quietly, or just give us a quick smile. Maybe check the price of something or ask a little question about the fibre makeup of something and move on. A smile, a hello, even just a little wave is absolutely enough if that's all you can manage. I think from a vendor's perspective, something that a lot of people won't realise is that a lot of us vendors aren't the best conversationalists either. And I personally get very nervous, especially if there's something new on the stand. We spend weeks, sometimes months getting ready for these shows, all the preparation, getting new patterns, new stock, new ideas, and getting them all ready to get set up at the show. Then those doors open and it's like the fear rushes in. Like, what if no one stops at my stand? What if nobody talks to me? What if no one says hi? Etc, etc. So it's a funny kind of mixture of feelings, because although we're excited to be at the yarn show and we love the opportunity to see people in real life, we're also I'm kind of secretly hoping that all the hard work is worth it and that people will like my products and they know and they understand that they're selected for a reason. Sometimes I am quite vocal about it. So for instance, the crochet hooks that I stock normally are Knit Pros, because that's what I recommend for those that are beginning and improving. My macrame cord, for instance, has been taken a long time to be selected, and it has to be imported and then relabeled. And at the Summer Wool Festival this weekend, I have a couple of new kits that are going to be on display. Is the packaging going to look right? Will people understand what's inside the kits? At the end of the day, people that are on their stands are just people behind a table, with nerves, with excitement, the same way that you're feeling visiting a show as well. So although there is no pressure to stop and have a long conversation, at the same time, give us a wave as you walk past. Sometimes stalls are absolutely chock-a-block with people and you can barely get onto the stand. And it's something I'm really conscious of when it comes to the layout of my stands now. I think it is important to remember that if a stand is exceptionally busy and you can't, you're having a look over people's shoulders, I can't do that, I'm too short. But if you're trying to get in and get what you want, just remember that the busy stand at that moment is likely to have a quiet spell 10 minutes later. So keep on walking and come on back. That's generally an easy one. In the same breath, if you see a stand that is looking a bit lonely and the stall holders kind of not twiddling their thumbs, but they're tidying up and making themselves busy, don't assume there's a reason why nobody's on it. It could be that 10 minutes ago they were the busy stand and someone's just quickly tidying up what they've been moved about as people have touched and squeezed things. I know that I get feedback quite occasionally, especially at London, with the way that my the first year I was there, I was closed in on two sides and only had one opening, and people were trying to get in and they were coming back 3 or 4 times to try and get into the stand. And I think at the same time, the same people were trying to get in. Oh, that's a delivery. Thank you, that's very kind.
You have a good one.
Yes, you too. Thank you, bye-bye. That's just how it goes. That's some more stock for the yarn show tomorrow. Wonderful. Where do we get to? As a vendor, when things get a little bit quieter, it can feel a little bit nerve-wracking because you're thinking, God, is no one liking my stuff? And, especially if you're not in that first rush of people coming through, that first 30 minutes can feel like, God, where is everybody? Because we can't leave our stands and go and see there's a lovely queue of people waiting to come in. We're just hoping that they're going to get to us quickly. But for those quieter moments, I have to remind myself that it's okay. It could be that a coach load has just left. It could be that they're all just having their lunch, or they're having a coffee break, that kind of thing. And pretty much you can guarantee within 20 minutes, everyone's back in the same room again and wandering around having their second glances. Pretty much my experience is as an exhibitor, you have an absolute mad rush. And then 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, everyone's moved on to the next stand or to the next section of the room, and you get a quiet breather for a second. So if you are one of those who's seen something you want to grab, but there are people in the way, let them people, and they will move on, and you can sidle on in and get exactly what you want. This sounds a bit of an obvious one really, but I want to talk about food. It's really important that if you have a dietary requirement that you double check what's going to be available. Nowadays, you'll probably be able to find a gluten-free cake or a decaf coffee very, very freely. But if you're looking for a full-blown meal, it might be worth researching on the event website what food options are going to be available. I don't often, as a vendor, get to eat a meal during the day, mainly because there's not time for me to go and queue up. So if you are someone who, I know that thinking again about the Summer Wool Festival, I know that we've got people coming that I know that are going pretty much for the Greek food van that is there every year because it's unbelievably good food. We also have, like it's my event, they also have, Nick and Natasha also have a cake, not them, my words aren't working. There's also an amazing section inside the canteen of the school where they have cakes and coffee, and the queues for that can be really long, but it's really worth it. I'm very fortunate because it's my local yarn show. I have people that can look after my stand while I nip off and get some food. But What I would say is to be aware of the queues for food and drinks. You'll find that there are water stations at most yarn shows as well. So you could either bring a refillable bottle or bring along a bottle of water with you just to tide you over between those stands and between your coffee breaks if you need it. There's no harm in bringing your own snacks in. Just be aware of not necessarily eating and drinking whilst you are looking at people's stands, because obviously we don't want any spillages. I would be devastated if I dropped my own coffee over something, let alone over someone else's stand, she says with her coffee. Something to consider is how you're going to be paying for the lovely purchases you make. The majority of vendors will take cash or card. I think most people would have a preference of taking cash, more because we don't, there are card fees for taking payments via a card machine. For me personally, if I'm on my own, I'm generally going to ask people to tap on my phone. And receipt-wise, if you're paying by card, most people will email your receipts through to you, but you'd need to type in your email address. So just be aware of that. You're unlikely to get a printed receipt unless you specifically ask one, and it will be emailed to you. I think it's always worth carrying a little bit of cash, just in case someone has a tombola or a little fun game, maybe to make a donation. If, like we have at Nick and Natasha's shows, they have a charity magazine swap. You just put a couple of pounds in and basically get past publications of loads of different magazines and books and things on a huge range of crafts. Something that a lot of us end up being guilty of when we are attending a yarn show is the time pressure. Of course, everybody wants to be the first in and everyone wants to grab a bargain. These bargains are still there at 12 o'clock on Saturday. They're probably still there at 12 o'clock on Sunday, to be completely honest. So if your yarn show opens at 10 a.m, yes, by all means get there ready so that you are one of the first few through the door. But if you arrive at 10 a.m, most of the queue is going to be gone through by the time you get to it, especially when you factor in parking the car and all that kind of stuff. So it is wonderful to be one of the first ones in. Of course, you're going to get the first choice of stuff. I have had quite a lot of sellouts recently, but I'm trying to manage my stock a bit better. But I think what's more important, rather than worrying about what time you're going to get there, is to make sure you have enough time to do a second lap. Especially when we factor in those busy stands. Some of these yarn shows are quite walkable, shall we say. There's lots of different nooks and crannies to go into, different buildings, different rooms, and you would be gutted if you missed something that you really wanted to see. You can always kind of research your yarn shows before you get there, having a look through what vendors are going to be there, and you can even generally see a map of the layout of how the event works, so you can have a rough idea of where you're going to need to go if you want to get a particular item. Plus it does help build some excitement if you can see where you're heading. I do feel that that first lap around the yarn show, be it 1 room or 10 rooms, can feel quite overwhelming. You're going to be taking in so many different colours, so many different crafts, so many different faces. You're going to see projects that, grab that camera and snap a photo or pick up a business card just in case you don't have a chance to get back to where you were. At least then you know where you've been and what you've seen. Make use of the booklets that they give you to mark on who you've seen. So maybe put little asterisks once you've visited a stand. And if you want to go back, give it a ring around the name so that you can find it again easily. One thing that I've discovered when I have been going to yarn shows is the different things you see on that second lap around. You'll see completely different stands because something else drew your attention on one side and there was a whole other stand that you missed on the other. It could be that it was full of people you just didn't see, and now you've timed it perfectly and you can get straight in and have a good look. So I would recommend having a good walk round, let the overwhelm calm down over a cup of tea or coffee, and then do your second lap and start making your purchases. We are, as vendors, we often hear, I'm just doing my first lap, and we get it. You don't want to spend all your money before you get to the stand you didn't even know was there. So please don't feel guilty about having a browse and not making that purchase straight away. We'll know you come back. You know where we are. Speaking of making that budget, this is something that's obviously going to be very personal for different people. But I do feel that a budget can be quite useful. And this is someone who has, during their first yarn show visit, took their credit card with them. That's a big no-no, because you will spend probably lots and lots of money that you didn't need to spend. And probably very much more than you'd planned. I do feel taking the time to think about what it is you are looking for, be it for a particular craft or a particular project. If you're going to buy a sweater quantity of yarn or something like that, having an idea of what you want to make will avoid buying random skeins of yarn that you're not going to end up using, or that you have to then spend years trying to pair up with something else. When it comes to setting a budget, as I said, that is a completely personal thing. If you are planning on, the average cost of a hand-dyed skein of yarn is anything between 18 to 25 pounds for 100 grams, regardless of what weight it is. That's a pretty penny. You're not likely to find huge quantities of budget-friendly yarn at the majority of wool shows. That's not to say that if you don't have a high budget, you won't enjoy a show. Remember, we can look and not buy. We don't have to buy everything we see. And I think as someone who still feels like they're only just learning more about crocheting with posh fibres, shall we say, I find it really interesting to find out more about the different fibres that are available, rather than assume all I can make with is acrylic. I went with that open mind and felt some different fibre makeups. And of course, over the years, I have fallen in with many different favourite fibres, including yak, bamboo. I still can't touch tencel. I wish I could. It's a good environmentally friendly choice, but I can't touch it. But I would never have known that had I just looked at some on the internet. One thing that I think that every vendor would agree with me on is someone saying, I'm just looking. It's like, it's okay. We want you to look. You don't have to buy. To look is free, most definitely. You really don't need my permission or anyone else's to browse through our products. We hope that one day you will make a future purchase, and that's exactly how we feel. Not everyone's budget is as big as someone else's, and that's also okay. You don't have to apologise for the budget you've set for yourself. A couple of times I've seen people paying with cash and saying, oh, that's it, that's my budget gone. And they only bring the amount of cash they're allowed to spend at that yarn show. And I think that's, if I was to go, when I next go to a yarn show, that's the approach I'm going to have to take, is when it's gone, it's gone. Because if I take out my card, I'll be topping up with a few extra skeins here or there. Browsing really is the fun part of a yarn show, and I think it is important to remember that you are allowed to do it. You don't need anybody's permission to have a look. I think one of the loveliest things about yarn shows is the opportunity to meet the people behind the business. It really does feel quite amazing to meet the person that's dyed that skein of yarn, to meet the person that designed that jumper, or even to meet the person who, what would the word be, to lathe a crochet hook. They've got those turned crochet hooks made of wood or something, or resin or something. You're meeting people who are utilising the skills that they have to provide us with tools and products that make our crafts that much more enjoyable and feel so much more special. That's something you will never get when you're shopping online, unless you're shopping with independent retailers. These yarn shows really create that special opportunity to meet the people behind these businesses, and you should feel an enormous sense of well-being, in the words of Blur. Not feeding the sparrows, but actually supporting these smaller businesses, because there are people behind them and they're feeding their pets and their children with the money they make at these yarn shows. It's really quite special. I really think it's such a lovely way to support these small businesses made up of people who genuinely love their crafts. And I know that I feel exceptionally lucky to be able to invest so much time in my crochet business and having fun crocheting. So if you are heading out to a yarn show this summer, or even into autumn when we're looking ahead to the big shows like the Knitting and Stitching show, I wish you the most amazing day. Remember to take your time, squish that yarn, ask all the questions that are burning in your mind, and have the opportunity to discover something new. I think most importantly, enjoy being surrounded by all things yarn and fibre and being surrounded by people who love crafting just as much as you do. I really hope I get to see you very soon at a local yarn show, or even the big one in October. If you still haven't secured your tickets for the Knit and Stitch show, I do have a discount code which will take £2 off the cost of your ticket. You can find that discount code in the description box below. And if you do happen to spot me at a yarn show, just give me a little wave. You can come over and say hello if you want to. I really genuinely love the opportunity to say hi to someone in real life, and even more so the chance to chat about crochet. Let me know in the comments which yarn show you hope to attend in the near future, and I hopefully will see you at one soon.